My name is Maya Delgado. I'm 31 years old, and on the afternoon of my daughter's 4th birthday party, my mother-in-law leaned across a table covered in pink frosting and rainbow streamers and hissed those 4 words directly into my face like she'd been saving them up for years. You're just a leech. The dining room went quiet. Not movie quiet, where everything fades to a gentle hush. Real quiet. The kind where you can hear a child breathing in the next room, where the refrigerator hum suddenly sounds like a thunderclap, where your own heartbeat becomes the loudest thing in the world. My daughter Rosie was 20 feet away, plastic tiara tilting sideways on her dark curls, completely unaware that her mother was standing at the center of a moment that would change everything. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I just looked at Patricia, my mother-in-law, the woman who had smiled at our wedding and kissed my cheek at the hospital when Rosie was born, and I thought, you have no idea what's coming. Before we get into this, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story truly resonates with you. And I want to hear from you. Drop your location and your local time in the comments right now. Knowing that someone out there is watching this at midnight in Manila, or on their lunch break in Manchester, or folding laundry in Memphis, it means more than I can say. This story is long and it is layered, and I need you with me for all of it. Let me take you back to March of 2009. I was 14 years old, living in a 3-bedroom ranch house on Delwood Avenue in Tucson, Arizona. The house was beige. Everything about my childhood was beige. My father, Robert Delgado, worked double shifts at a warehouse on the south side of the city, and my mother, Carmen, cleaned hotel rooms at the Marriott on East Broadway 6 days a week. They were not absent. I want to be clear about that, because this story has enough villains, and my parents are not among them. They were present, they were loving, and they were exhausted in the particular way that working-class people are exhausted, bone deep and daily, without complaint. What they couldn't be was there for everything. And everything, when you're 14, feels essential. I had an older sister named Daniela, who was 17 and ran track and got straight A's and was, in every measurable way, easier to parent than I was. Not because I was difficult. I wasn't. I was quiet and bookish, and spent most of my free time in the Tucson Public Library on Pima Street, checking out novels my parents had never heard of. But Daniela was visible in a way I wasn't. She had trophies, she had ribbons, she had a coach who called the house and told my parents what a gift they'd raised. I had library finds and an obsessive knowledge of Victorian literature. You can imagine which one got more applause. The first memory that matters happened in October of that same year. The school play, Tucson Magnet Middle School's fall production of The Wizard of Oz, and I had been cast as Dorothy. Not an ensemble Dorothy. The Dorothy. I had rehearsed for 8 weeks. I had memorized every line, every blocking note, every vocal cue. The performance was on a Friday night, October 23rd. Daniela had a track invitational in Phoenix the same weekend. My parents drove to Phoenix. I performed to a half-empty auditorium and came home to a dark house and a note on the counter that said, "Leftovers in fridge. So proud of you. Love, Mom." The casserole was cold. I ate it anyway, still in my costume, sequined shoes on the kitchen floor. I told myself it didn't hurt. I got very good at telling myself things. The second memory is about Christmas, 2011. I was 16. Daniela had just gotten early acceptance to Arizona State, and my parents, in a joy that I now understand, was also relief. The relief of a dream beginning to come true, celebrated by buying her a laptop, a Dell Inspiron. $649. I remember the price because I accidentally saw the receipt tucked under the paper bag on the kitchen counter, and the number lodged in my brain with the stubborn precision of a thing you're not supposed to know. My gift that year was a $50 Barnes & Noble gift card and a North Face jacket from the outlet mall. The jacket was a size too small. My mother said I could exchange it after the holiday rush. I never did. I wore it for 2 winters until the zipper broke and I safety pinned the collar closed. I told myself it didn't matter. The third memory, and the one that lives closest to the surface even now, was my high school graduation in May of 2013. I graduated in the top 8% of my class. I had won the Pima County essay competition 2 years running. I had been accepted to the University of Arizona with a partial scholarship. Not full, but meaningful, a recognition that I had worked for something. My parents attended the ceremony. There were hundreds of us crossing that stage, and when my name was called, I could hear my father's whistle from the second row. That part was perfect. That part I hold carefully. But the dinner afterward, the celebration dinner my mother had promised, was at Applebee's on Oracle Road because it was a Saturday night, and Daniela had a study group she didn't want to miss. And Applebee's was near her apartment. We sat in a sticky booth, and my sister checked her phone 4 times during my graduation dinner, and my mother said, "Maya, you're so low maintenance we never have to worry about you." She meant it as a compliment. It wasn't. I ordered the cheapest thing on the menu. I smiled. I told myself it was enough. I carried those 3 memories, the empty auditorium, the wrong-sized jacket, the Applebee's booth, into adulthood the way you carry a pebble in your shoe. Not debilitating, not dramatic. Just always there, always slightly wrong, reminding you with every step that something small is off. I don't tell you these things to make you pity me. I tell you because you need to understand the specific texture of invisibility I was already carrying when I walked into the Callahan family for the first time at 24 years old, fresh from graduate school, in love with a man named Daniel, and completely unprepared for what it meant to go from one kind of not seen to another. I met Daniel Callahan at a graduate mixer in September of 2018 at the University of Arizona's Student Union. I was finishing my master's degree in education policy. He was a second-year law student. He was the kind of person who makes a room feel warmer just by being in it, not in a flashy way, not in a look-at-me way, but in the way that a good reading lamp makes a whole corner of a room feel livable. We talked for 3 hours that night about everything and nothing, and I drove home on the 10 wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. I hadn't. He texted at 11:15. "That was the best conversation I've had since moving here. Can we do it again?" We did, and again, and again. By November we were inseparable, and by the following March he had driven me to Sabino Canyon and asked me to be his girlfriend with absolutely no fanfare and a granola bar he'd found in his jacket pocket, which he held out to me like a ring. I still have the wrapper. Daniel's family was from Scottsdale. His father, Gerald Callahan, had built a moderately successful commercial real estate business over 30 years, and his mother, Patricia, had devoted herself entirely to the project of the Callahan family image. I don't say that cruelly. I say it observationally, the way you might say someone devoted themselves to painting or to medicine. Patricia's life was the management of appearances, the curating of what the family looked like from the outside. She had a circle of friends at the Scottsdale Country Club. She chaired a charitable committee for a children's hospital gala every spring. She wore Eileen Fisher and Talbots and had her hair blown out every Thursday morning. She was not unkind to me. In the beginning. She was something more confusing. She was pleasant in the way that expensive hotel lobbies are pleasant, comfortable, well-maintained, and somehow designed to make you feel like you don't quite belong. The first indication that something was wrong came at Easter 2019. Daniel and I had been together for 6 months. I had met his parents twice. Briefly, carefully, the way you meet important people when the relationship is still new and fragile. Easter was the first family event, the first real immersion. The Callahans hosted at their house on Camelback Road, a 4,000-square-foot stucco house with a pool and a lemon tree and a sub-zero refrigerator that I remember distinctly because Gerald opened it to show me the wine selection the way other men show off cars. Patricia had cooked an entire ham, deviled eggs, roasted asparagus, scalloped potatoes. The table was set with actual china. There were cloth napkins. Daniel's sister, Christine, was there with her husband, Brett, and their 2-year-old son, Cody. Christine was 4 years older than Daniel and had the particular confidence of a person who has always been her mother's favorite. She wasn't mean to me at Easter. She was something more precise than mean, she was simply uninterested. I sat across from her for 2 hours, and she asked me 3 questions, all of them variants of "and what is it you're studying again?" As if the answer kept failing to lodge. I told myself I was being paranoid. By the time Daniel and I got engaged in June of 2021, in his grandmother's garden in Flagstaff, on a Tuesday afternoon, with a ring he'd spent 4 months choosing, and a speech he'd clearly rehearsed, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold still. I had 3 years of small data points. 3 years of Patricia telling me, in ways always deniable, always cushioned in pleasantness, that I was not quite what she'd envisioned for her son. 3 years of Christine asking about my little job. I had finished my master's and was working as a curriculum coordinator for the Tucson Unified School District, a job I was proud of, a job that mattered. 3 years of Gerald being generically warm in the way that men are sometimes warm when they don't know what else to be. 3 years of telling myself I was imagining the temperature of the room. I wasn't imagining it. The engagement announcement was the first real crack. Patricia had expected Daniel to propose to someone named Ashley or Madison, someone from the country club world, someone whose parents had equity. I had equity in the form of education loans and a 2016 Honda Civic with a ding in the rear bumper. My parents came to Scottsdale for the celebratory dinner Patricia organized, and I want to give her credit for organizing it, because she did. She set a beautiful table and made a beautiful meal. But the dinner was uncomfortable in the specific way that dinners are when two social worlds have been placed next to each other without an adapter. My father wore his good shirt. He shook Gerald's hand 3 times, each shake a little too emphatic, the way men are when they're nervous and masking it with physicality. My mother brought flowers from Safeway. Patricia accepted them with a smile that didn't reach her cheekbones. Afterward, I overheard Patricia telling Christine in the kitchen, and I was not meant to hear this. She's sweet enough, but I do wonder sometimes what Daniel sees beyond the obvious. I went to the bathroom and stood at the sink for a very long time. I looked at myself in the mirror. I thought about the safety-pinned jacket. I thought about the Applebee's booth. I thought, I know this feeling. I know exactly this feeling. If you've ever been in a room full of people and still felt completely alone, drop a candle in the comments, because I see you, and this story is for you. The wedding was in April of 2022, at a venue in Sedona called Tlaquepaque, with red rock formations in every window frame and fairy lights in the courtyard. It cost $42,000, a number that still makes me grip something when I say it aloud. Daniel and I had saved $30,000 between us, my education salary and his first-year associate salary at a firm in Phoenix. His parents contributed $8,000. My parents contributed $4,000 from a savings account my father had been quietly building for years without telling me, money he had set aside from overtime shifts and skipped lunches, and when he pressed the check into my hand at the rehearsal dinner, I cried in a way I had not let myself cry in years. Gerald's contribution of $8,000 was made with the particular energy of someone who expected the gesture to be remembered and referenced. And it was. It was. The first year of marriage was good. Not fairy tale good. Real life good. We were building something. We rented a 2-bedroom apartment in Tempe, furnished it gradually, ate a lot of pasta, argued about whose turn it was to call the electric company, laughed constantly. In February of 2023, we found out I was pregnant, and I remember sitting on the bathroom floor at 7 in the morning with the test in my hand, and Daniel crouching in the doorway in his socks, and both of us laughing until we cried without quite knowing why. It was the best morning of my life up to that point. Patricia's reaction was joy. Unambiguous, genuine joy. I want to be fair. Whatever her feelings about me, her feelings about the prospect of a grandchild were real and warm, and I watched her open like a window in the way that some people do when they're given something they've wanted. She called me 3 times the week we announced the pregnancy. She sent a package with a hand-knitted blanket she had made herself, cream-colored with tiny yellow stars. I softened toward her. I told Daniel, "Your mother loves you, and she's going to love this baby, and maybe the rest of it was just adjustment, just transition, just 2 women learning to share the most important man in both our lives." He held my face in his hands and said, "She's getting there, give her time." I gave her time. Rosie was born in October of 23. October 14th, 3:52 in the morning, after 18 hours of labor, 7 minutes of absolute terror, and 1 moment of profound cosmic silence in which everything I had ever worried about became completely, utterly irrelevant. She weighed 7 pounds, 4 ounces. She had Daniel's dark hair and my grandmother's nose. I held her and thought, this is what I was for. Not the school play, not the grades, not the thesis, not any of it, this, and then I thought, I will never, not once let this child feel invisible. The first year of Rosie's life was survival. Beautiful, disorienting, sleep-deprived survival. I took 4 months of maternity leave. Daniel, to his enormous credit, took 6 weeks and was present in ways I had only hoped for and had not quite let myself expect. We had good months, and hard months, and very hard months, and through all of it we were a team, genuinely a team, and if the previous 3 years had given me reasons to doubt the foundation, that year gave me reasons to believe in the structure. Patricia visited often, too often, sometimes, every other weekend for the first 6 months, arriving with casseroles and strong opinions about sleep schedules and a proprietary energy around Rosie that I made myself overlook because the love was real and the help, frankly, was sometimes necessary. Christine visited twice. Both times she treated me with the pleasant uninterest she had always extended, like a door held open by someone who is already looking away. The trouble, the real trouble, crystallized around money. Not in one dramatic moment, but in a series of small deliberate pinches. In January of 2024, Daniel was passed over for a promotion at the firm, a decision that was unjust and that he appealed internally and eventually, in May, won. But in those 4 months between January and May, we were stretched. Not broke, not in danger, but stretched. We missed one mortgage payment in February. One. And somehow this information reached Patricia, and somehow Patricia's response to this information was to begin, quietly and consistently, referring to me as the financial problem, not in those words. Patricia never used those words. She used phrases like, I just worry about whether Maya's salary covers the lifestyle you want, and have you thought about whether it makes more sense for Maya to find something more lucrative? And once, in a car conversation with Daniel, that he repeated to me, because he didn't understand yet that it was a pattern and not a moment, I just hope Daniel isn't carrying more than his share. I was earning $68,000 a year as a curriculum coordinator. I had managed our household budget with the precision of someone who had learned early that money required attention. I had not bought new clothes for 14 months. I drove the same Honda Civic with the same dent in the bumper. I was not the problem. I was not a leech, but the word was being built around me, brick by invisible brick, before it was ever said aloud. And then there was Gerald. Gerald, who had contributed $8,000 to our wedding in 2022 and had in the 2 years since managed to reference it in 11 separate conversations. I counted, because at some point I started counting in ways both subtle and not. After everything we've invested in getting you two started. We wanted to help, and we did help, significantly. Some parents don't do what we did. 11 times in 24 months. At an average of 1 reference per 22 days. I counted because counting gave me a sense of control over something I couldn't otherwise manage. $8,000. 11 references. You do the math. In March of 25, something happened that I need you to understand fully. This is the thing that turned the temperature up. Daniel's firm, the firm he had been promoted at, the firm he had stayed at through the lean months on the basis of that promise, underwent a restructuring. 3 of the 8 associates were let go. Daniel was not let go. But 2 colleagues he'd been close to were gone overnight, and the remaining associates were asked to absorb additional caseloads with no additional compensation for a transitional period that the partners promised would last no longer than 90 days. It lasted 7 months. During those 7 months, Daniel worked 12 to 14-hour days, 6 days a week. He came home gray and depleted, and ate dinner and went to bed and woke up and did it again. I covered everything. I handled Rosie's drop-off and pickup. I handled the groceries and the bills, and the one minor car repair, and the pediatrician appointment, and the birthday party planning, and the Christmas card, and the thank you notes, and the everything. I am not saying this to claim credit. I am saying it to establish with precision what I was doing during the period in which Patricia and Gerald began expressing concern about my contribution. In April of 2025, at a Sunday dinner at Patricia and Gerald's house, Christine said, and I want to get this exactly right, because I wrote it down afterward in the Notes app on my phone while sitting in the car in the driveway for 12 minutes before driving home. She said, "Daniel, I just think it's worth asking whether the current setup is really fair. You're working so hard and Maya's job is so comfortable." She said comfortable the way some people say small. I looked at Daniel. He said nothing. That was the moment I understood that silence had become the wallpaper of this family. That saying nothing was its own kind of position. I said calmly, "I work full-time and I'm raising our daughter, and I'm keeping the household running while Daniel gets through an incredibly hard stretch at work. That's not comfortable. That's partnership." Christine smiled at me with great pleasantness and said, "Of course," and the conversation moved on. And the table kept eating, and I kept sitting there. If you've ever been surrounded by people who treat you as a problem to be managed rather than a person to be known, type C in the comments, because I have never found a lonelier feeling. I want to tell you about the 4 months between that Sunday dinner in April and the birthday party in October. I want to tell you because they matter, because the small details are load-bearing. In May, I enrolled in a professional development certification program for educational leadership. The program was online, offered through Johns Hopkins, and it cost $4,200, money I paid entirely from my own savings, money I had been setting aside in a separate account since the previous year with a specific purpose that I had not yet told Daniel about. I took the classes on Tuesday and Thursday evenings after Rosie was asleep, laptop on the kitchen table, coffee going cold beside me, sometimes so tired I had to read the same paragraph 4 times before it landed. I did not tell Patricia or Christine or Gerald. I did not perform this effort for anyone. I just did it. In June, I applied for a position at the Arizona Department of Education, Director of Curriculum Innovation, a role that had been posted internally and that I was, by any objective measure, qualified for. I spent 30 hours on the application over 3 weeks. I wrote a 12-page portfolio. I had 3 letters of recommendation, including one from my graduate advisor at U of A, and one from the superintendent of Tucson Unified, a woman named Dr. Sharon Ellis, who had watched me work for 4 years, and who wrote, according to the excerpt she shared with me, that I was one of the most methodical and quietly powerful educators she had encountered in 20 years of public service. I submitted the application on a Tuesday in June at 11:47 at night, Rosie asleep down the hall, Daniel asleep in our room, the house completely still. In July, Daniel received a raise. A significant one, an acknowledgement that the firm had extracted extraordinary labor from him for 7 months and needed to compensate accordingly or lose him. His salary went up by $22,000 annually. We went to dinner to celebrate, just the 2 of us, the first real date night we'd had in months, and over pasta at a restaurant on Mill Avenue in Tempe. I told him about the Johns Hopkins certificate and the ADE application and the separate savings account. He went quiet for a moment. Not upset. I watched his face for upset, and I didn't find it. He went quiet in the way he goes quiet when something means more to him than he immediately knows how to say. Then he said, "Maya, why didn't you tell me?" And I said, "Because I needed to do it for me first, before I told anyone, before it was anyone else's thing." He reached across the table and held my hand and said, "I've been working so hard I haven't been watching, I'm sorry," and I thought, this is why I married you. In August, I got the interview. In September, the second interview. In late September, September 28th, a Tuesday, 3:15 in the afternoon, I got the call. Director of Curriculum Innovation, Arizona Department of Education. A salary of $94,000 annually, with state benefits and a title and a set of responsibilities I had been quietly preparing myself for since I was 22 years old, and sat in a policy seminar and thought, this is what I want. This is what I'm building toward. I accepted on the phone. I said thank you, and I hung up and I sat in my car in the parking lot of Rosie's preschool for 4 minutes doing absolutely nothing. Just sitting. Then I called Daniel. Then I called my mother, who cried. Then I called my father, who said, in the voice he uses when he is proudest and least sure how to show it, "There she is, there's my girl." I did not call Patricia. I did not call Gerald. I did not call Christine. Rosie's 4th birthday party was October 11th, 2025, a Saturday. We had it at our house. Our house, the 3-bedroom in Tempe that we'd bought in early 2024, the mortgage I had signed alongside Daniel, the mortgage my name was equally on. I had decorated for a week. Pink and gold streamers, a banner that said Rosie is 4 in balloon letters, a cake from a bakery in downtown Tempe called Sweet Republic that had a fondant unicorn on top and cost $112, which I had decided was entirely reasonable for the occasion. 12 children from Rosie's preschool class, 8 adults including us. It was a real party. It was a beautiful party. It was the party I had been looking forward to for 3 months. Patricia and Gerald arrived at 11:30, 30 minutes before the party started, which was classic Patricia, arriving early enough to establish a kind of territorial claim on the space. To have arranged herself in the kitchen with opinions about where the snacks should be before the other guests arrived. I had learned to accept this. I had learned to see it as a form of love, even if the form was inconvenient. Gerald brought a card. Patricia brought a gift. A large, expensively wrapped box that turned out to contain a Pottery Barn Kids dress-up wardrobe set. Retail $239. I know because I looked it up later, in the specific way I had learned to look up information I suspected would be useful to have. I thanked her warmly. I meant it. It was a beautiful gift. Christine and Brett arrived at noon with Cody, who was now 7, and had his father's blonde hair and his mother's uninterest in other children. Brett was harmless in the specific way of men who are married to difficult women and have learned to become extremely good at watching sports and saying nothing of consequence. Christine air-kissed my cheek and said the house looked so fun, with an emphasis on fun, that somehow made it sound inadequate. I let it go. I had been letting things go for 3 years and I was, by that October afternoon, extremely proficient at it. The party went beautifully. 12 small children in the backyard with a bubble machine and a ring toss game, and music from a Bluetooth speaker balanced on the patio table. Rosie was incandescent, the way 4-year-olds are at their own parties, absolutely inside the joy of it. Tiara slightly sideways, dress slightly grass-stained within 40 minutes, voice pitched at the particular frequency of pure happiness that makes you feel, if you are that child's parent, like you have done at least one thing right in your life. I was inside refilling a fruit platter at approximately 1:15 when Patricia came in from the back door. I heard her heels on the kitchen tile. She always wore heels, even to children's birthday parties, a detail that had once seemed elegant and now seemed like information. I didn't turn around. I was arranging strawberries. Maya. Her voice was quiet, controlled. The voice she used when she'd decided to say something. I turned around. She was standing just inside the sliding glass door, arms crossed, head slightly tilted in the way she tilted it when she had composed a particular sentence and was about to deliver it. Gerald was behind her, which I noticed because Gerald was rarely behind her in this specific positioning, the positioning of witness. "We've been talking," she said. "Gerald and I, and Christine." I put the fruit platter down. "There are some concerns about the financial arrangement, about whether Daniel is in a fair situation, about whether he has a real partner, or whether he's been doing this alone." I said nothing. I waited. "We love you, Maya. But we need to be honest." She paused. And then she leaned forward, barely perceptible, just far enough to close the distance in a way that felt deliberate. And she said it. "You're just a leech." The refrigerator hummed. In the backyard I could hear Rosie laughing, that high bright sound completely untouched by this moment. Gerald said nothing. He looked at his shoes. 5 seconds of silence. 5 seconds in which every single memory settled into its proper place. The safety-pinned jacket, and the Applebee's booth, and the Easter dinner, and the Sunday dinner in April, and Christine's careful pleasantness, and Gerald's 11 references, and all $4,200 I'd spent in silence, and all 30 hours of the application, and Dr. Sharon Ellis's letter, and September 28th at 3:15 in the afternoon. 5 seconds. And then I said, "You should probably come into the living room." Patricia looked surprised. Not by the calmness. She expected calm from me. She'd always read my calm as softness, but by the direction. The living room was where guests were. The living room was not a private space for private conversations. "I don't think that's necessary," she said. "I do," I said. And I walked out of the kitchen. I want you to understand something about the next 3 minutes. I did not raise my voice. Not once. I did not cry. Not once. I had spent 17 years from the sequined shoes on the kitchen floor to this moment, learning to speak from a place below emotion, from the bedrock of fact, and fact was what I had. Daniel was in the living room with Brett and two of the other parents, cups of coffee, easy conversation. He looked up when I came in. He read my face in the way only people who love you can read your face, the way that gets past the expression to the information underneath. He stood up immediately, which is one of the 10,000 small reasons I love him. Patricia and Gerald have some concerns they were sharing with me in the kitchen, I said, to the room. Clearly, calmly, about whether I'm a real partner to Daniel, whether I'm financially contributing. I looked at Patricia, who had followed me in and was standing just inside the doorway. Patricia, you said I'm just a leech. I want to make sure I heard that correctly. Christine made a sound from the armchair. A sharp intake of breath. Brett looked at the ceiling. Patricia said, Maya, this isn't the place. It wasn't the place in the kitchen either, I said. But that's where it happened. Daniel said, quietly. Mom, on September 28th, I said. I accepted a position as Director of Curriculum Innovation at the Arizona Department of Education, starting salary $94,000. I'll be overseeing curriculum policy for the entire state of Arizona. I let that land. I watched it land. I paid for the leadership certification that qualified me for the role myself, $4,200 from my own savings, while managing our household and caring for our daughter during the hardest stretch of Daniel's career. I didn't tell anyone because I needed to do it for myself first. I looked at Gerald. I'm not a leech. I'm a person who has been working very hard in directions you weren't watching. The room was quiet. Rosie's laugh came through the window again. Sun through glass, pink streamers in the hallway, a birthday candle unlit on the kitchen counter. Christine said softly, and I think genuinely, I didn't know. No, I said, you didn't. I want to tell you what happened in the 4 hours after that moment, because the resolution was not clean, and it was not cinematic, and it was not the ending I had written for myself in the versions of this I had never consciously composed. Patricia sat down on the arm of the sofa, which was unlike her, the kind of sitting that isn't chosen but is surrendered to. Gerald put his hands in his pockets, took them out again, and sat on the window bench with the particular heaviness of a man encountering something he'd been deliberately not encountering. The other parents, bless them, honestly, quietly gathered their children and moved the party to the backyard with a grace and instinct I will forever be grateful for. Daniel's friend Mark, one of the party guests, caught my eye as he ushered his daughter outside and gave me a single nod that said, "We see you. We are removing ourselves. Take the time you need." Daniel sat beside me on the couch. His hand found mine. His hand was warm and solid, and I held it tightly. "I owe you an apology," Patricia said. She was not looking at me. She was looking at her own hands. And then she looked up. More than one. I waited. The things I said, not just today. There have been things I've said. Things Christine and I have said between ourselves that weren't fair. She paused. I had an idea of what Daniel's life should look like, and when it looked different, I made that your fault, and that wasn't right. I want to tell you that I felt triumph. I want to tell you that I felt vindicated and righteous, and that some long-held tension released. Some of it did. A small specific knot somewhere behind my sternum loosened a fraction, but mostly what I felt was tired. The kind of tired that is the other side of a very long effort. I was tired of being measured. I was tired of proving. I was tired of the weight of other people's expectations pressing against the structure I was quietly building. I appreciate that, I said. And I meant it. Not warmly, not yet, but truthfully. Gerald cleared his throat. We should have been paying more attention. He looked at Daniel. Your mother and I, we should have been more curious. He looked at me. About who you actually are. We took Christine's lead when we should have looked for ourselves. Christine, from the armchair, said nothing for a long moment. Then, I didn't like you for a long time. Blunt, which was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. Not because you'd done anything, because I was afraid you'd change things, and I handled that badly. She looked at her hands. I'm sorry. Brett looked at the ceiling again, which by this point seemed like his primary contribution to family dynamics, and I found it oddly, genuinely comforting. Daniel spoke last. He spoke to his family. He said, and I want to get this right because I want you to hear it. Whoever you are watching this, I want you to hear what a person sounds like when they're finally fully in your corner. Maya has been my partner in every real sense of that word. She has carried things I didn't even see her carrying, because she carried them quietly, because she was raised to carry things quietly and I didn't push hard enough to see. That stops today. She is not a leech. She is the person this family is built around. And if that's not something you can see going forward, I need to know, because my family is here in this house and it is whole, and I will not participate in anything that makes her feel otherwise. The room was very still. I squeezed Daniel's hand once. He squeezed back. We should go check on Rosie, I said. We went outside. The sun was warm and the bubble machine was still going, and Rosie was running in small ecstatic circles, tiara now fully sideways, dress covered in grass and frosting, absolutely and entirely 4 years old and joyful. She saw me come out and ran over and held up her arms, and I picked her up and held her, and she smelled like birthday cake and sunscreen, and I thought, this is the whole world, this right here. Patricia came out a few minutes later. She didn't approach me immediately. She sat in one of the patio chairs and watched her granddaughter. After a while, 20 minutes maybe, in which the party resumed its gentle rhythm, and Cody and Rosie played some complicated game involving sticks and imaginary dragons, Patricia came and stood beside me. She has your determination, she said. I've watched it in her since she was a baby. She decides something and she does it. She paused. That's not from us. I looked at my daughter. No, I said, it's not. We stood there together for a few minutes. Not reconciled, not yet, not repaired. Some things don't repair, they just scar over into something you can live with. But standing together, watching the same child, and that was something. That was a beginning, or a middle, depending on where you start counting. The dinner afterward, we ordered pizza, because it was a birthday party, and children and pizza are essentially contractually obligated to exist in proximity to each other, was quiet and strange and occasionally almost normal. Patricia helped Rosie blow out her candles on the Sweet Republic cake. Gerald sang happy birthday with the particular off-key sincerity of a man who has decided to mean it. Christine held Cody on her lap and watched her nephew more carefully than I'd ever seen her watch him, like she was seeing something she'd missed. Brett ate 4 slices of pepperoni pizza, which was the most present he'd been all day, and I appreciated it. Before they left, Patricia found me alone in the kitchen while I was wrapping leftover cake. She stood in the doorway, the same doorway she'd stood in 3 hours earlier with her arms crossed and her 4-word verdict, and she said, I'd like to start over. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I'd like to try. I thought about it. I thought about it honestly, not performatively, not in the way of someone who has already decided and is waiting out the clock, but actually, I thought about the cream-colored blanket with the yellow stars that Rosie slept under every night. I thought about Patricia's face in the delivery room, the absolute openness of her joy. I thought about the space between what people are and what they're capable of becoming, and how you can know something about someone's capacity for growth without erasing what they've already done. I'd like that too, I said. Slowly, but yes. She nodded, and she left. I finished wrapping the cake. Through the window I could see Daniel pushing Rosie on the backyard swing, the last light of October laying gold across everything, my daughter's voice carrying pure and high and utterly untroubled. I stood at the sink for a long time, not crying, just standing. Have you ever had a moment where you could feel clearly, maybe for the first time, the exact weight of everything you'd been carrying? When it doesn't lift, not entirely, not all at once, but you can finally see its outline, its dimensions, its edges. Drop a star in the comments if you know that feeling, because it is exhausting, and it is clarifying, and it is, in the strangest way, a kind of grace. That was October 11th. It is now several months later, and I want to tell you where things stand because I believe in the honest version of the ending, not the polished one. I started my position at the Arizona Department of Education on November 3rd. My first week was one of the most demanding and satisfying weeks of my professional life. The work is real, the stakes are real, I am sitting at a table where decisions that matter are made, and I am not there by accident or legacy or comfort. I am there because I built something, quietly and consistently, in the hours when no one was watching. My father called me on my first Monday morning at 7:15 and said, "Go get them, Misha." I kept that voicemail. I will keep it forever. Daniel and I are better than we have been in 2 years. Not because a problem was solved, but because a silence was broken, and we are both, in our different ways, learning what it means to see each other fully. He has started asking, in ways both small and significant, what I'm carrying, not assuming, asking. That shift is enormous. That shift is the whole thing. With Patricia, we have had 3 dinners since October, each one a little less careful than the last, a little more actual. She brought Rosie a set of watercolor paints last month and sat on the kitchen floor with her for 40 minutes painting. I watched from the hallway, and I thought, there are people who can only reach you through the children, and sometimes that is enough of a bridge to walk across. We are not close, we may not become close. But we are in the same room with less armor on, and for now that is what honest progress looks like. Christine and I have texted 4 times. 3 of them were about Rosie. One was a link she sent me to an article about educational policy in Arizona, with no comment, no context, just the link. I thought about that for a long time. I decided it was a hand extended in the only language she currently has. I texted back, "Good read, thanks." She replied with a thumbs up. That is, currently, the full extent of our rapprochement, and I am at peace with it. My parents, who do not know the full story of October 11th because some things you protect your parents from, do know that I am settled and thriving, and that their granddaughter has a watercolor painting of a purple dog hanging on her bedroom wall. My father and Daniel went to a Diamondbacks game in November. They came home talking about relief pitching and stopped in the kitchen for leftover enchiladas at 10:30 at night, and I sat at the kitchen table listening to them and thought, this is also mine. This too is something I built. Rosie is 4 years and several months old. She is loud and opinionated and devoted to her stuffed elephant named Gerald. She named him before she knew her grandfather's name, which is either a remarkable coincidence or the universe's idea of a joke. She tells me every night before sleep, "Mama, I love you the most plus infinity," which is her current mathematical framework for the absolute maximum. I tell her back, "I mean it. Here is what I want to say to you. Whoever you are, whatever time it is, wherever you're sitting, this story is not about revenge. I want to be clear about that. Nothing that happened in that living room in October was revenge. Revenge has an appetite. What I was practicing, in those 4 years before that moment, was not appetite. It was architecture. I was building something, floor by floor, in silence, not because I was planning a confrontation, but because I was building a life, and you build it from the inside out, from the floor up, and you build it whether or not anyone is watching. People will underestimate you. Not always out of cruelty, sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of limited imagination, sometimes out of the lazy shorthand of a family that learned to see itself in a particular way and never updated the picture. The underestimation does not have to stop you. In fact, and I say this with the full weight of having lived it, the underestimation can be a kind of privacy. It gives you space to work in. It gives you the gift of low stakes, the freedom of not being watched, the extraordinary advantage of moving while everyone assumes you're standing still. The word leech was meant to shrink me. I know that. And for one small sharp moment in the kitchen, in the pause between the word and my response, it did. I felt the old smallness, the safety-pinned jacket, the Applebee's booth. I felt 14 and invisible and precisely wrong-sized. And then the pause ended, and I moved forward, because that is all there is in the end, the pause and then the moving forward. I am 31 years old. I am a mother, a wife, a daughter, a public servant, a reader of Victorian novels, and the current director of something that matters. I am not low maintenance. I am not comfortable. I am not a leech. I am a person who has been building something since she was 14 years old, with a library card, and a cold casserole, and a sequined dress, and the building is not finished, and it will not be finished, and I find that thought not frightening but extraordinary. Type built in the comments if you're building something right now that no one can see yet, because I believe you. I believe in the invisible work. I believe in the Tuesday nights and the Thursday mornings, and the savings accounts nobody knows about, and the applications submitted at midnight, and the phone calls accepted at 3:15 in the afternoon. I believe in the architecture of a life assembled from the inside. And I believe that when the moment comes, not if, when, you will be ready because you have been building. Thank you for being here. If this story reached you, please subscribe. There are more stories coming, and they are all true, and they are all about the same thing, the extraordinary, ordinary work of becoming who you actually are. Check the description for another video I think you'll want to see. And in the comments, I want to know, what are you building right now that nobody knows about yet? Tell me. I am listening. I have always been listening.